that manifesto is summed up best in a sentence in that, like, every single person has a purpose. And in that purpose is an unimaginable potential. And we're trying to make sure that Mosaic is the best place to be able to fulfill that potential, help others do the same.
Welcome to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Bryant. In every episode, we bring in guests who will inspire, encourage you to be more effective in your mission field. On today's episode, I have with me McLaren Lewis. How are you doing, McLaren?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing really well.
Excited to talk to you about Mosaic London, just seeing you online, getting started, teaming up with Erwin and Aaron McManus. Talk about maybe your experience. We're going to go a little bit further back. I will get to the church plant soon, but I want to hear about how you came to faith in your context.
Wow.
I just would love to know what about the message of Jesus captured your heart as you were either growing up or as a young adult, or where that happened for you.
Well, I came to faith as a 14-year-old. And I think, to be honest, a lot of the way that I came to faith has shaped the way that I pastor now. And so it was really special because I basically, long story short, I was a typical teenager. I was the man of the house at the time because my dad was living in another country, and so I thought I had everything sorted out. And there was certain behavior that came with that, both inside the house and outside of it. And anyway, one day I asked my mum I told her that I wanted to learn the drums. And she found a drum teacher that was down the road. And then when I rocked up to the drum lesson, I found out that the drum teacher was a youth pastor. And so once I got over the setup that was obviously happening, I got into drums, and we built a friendship, we built a relationship. And so I think I learned the drums for 2 years before he was able to trick me into coming to one of his gatherings that he was doing on the weekend. And the only way that he got me into it was there were some other people from my school who went to the youth ministry. And so he found out the days that I would do sport and when I wouldn't. And my excuse was always that I had basketball on. But they changed the days for basketball, and he invited me because he was speaking. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got basketball." And he's like, "I know you don't. So you have no excuses." Anyway, I ended up going. I stayed for reasons other than what was said on stage, just because I made a whole bunch of really good friends there. And then I was actually on the way to my first ever drug deal as a young person. And I was doing that with a friend of mine. And as we walked past the church where this youth ministry was, I was like, "Oh, hold on, before we do this, you have to see this, because there is more beautiful people than I've ever seen anywhere in this one place. We'll go in for 5 minutes." 5 minutes turned into 10, and then like a lot of us who come to faith, there was a message that spoke directly to where I was at. And I was kind of floored by the fact that if God would care that much to be able to put me in a moment with him, that no one could have known the timing to be that perfect, or those words to be articulated in that way. All of these things came together, and I ended up in tears down the front. And of course, the youth pastor, my drum teacher, came up and explained exactly what I'd just gone through. Yeah, after 2 and a bit years of drum lessons, I ended up coming to faith.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I still tell him now that he was a great youth pastor, but a terrible, terrible drum teacher, because I still can't play the drums.
That's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
and knowing just a little bit of your story, eventually you also became a youth pastor. And what about ministry in the UK? Might be different than other places. I mean, I just am struck with the beautiful story of a relationship, a friendship that helped you find faith. I imagine as you came to faith, you probably operated similarly in your ministry, but But what makes ministry in a post-Christian context like the UK hard or different than maybe what others are used to experiencing?
I think I think all of it is hard because we, especially specifically in London, like I guess the equivalent would be New York and different parts of America. There's a difference even in that. And so here, I think the most difficult thing is how guarded people are, and I think the guarded nature of people here comes from the fact that there is so many options when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to what community might look like, when it comes to building a life for yourself. There is so many options, but there isn't much access. And so we end up in an environment where in every conversation, it feels like someone's trying to take advantage of a situation. And so when you walk the streets of London, it isn't a place where everyone's smiling and saying hello. Everyone's very protective of their time, protective of, their safety. And so it's a very guarded place. And so, of course, that provides challenges across the board, whether it comes to all of the options that I just talked about in terms of building community and building relationships. It's a hard place to be able to do that.
Well, and you can follow along with Mosaic London on Instagram, Mosaic LDN. That's how to connect as well. And now you're planning a church. So, how do you plan a
Yeah.
church in an unguarded, protective, skeptical London? Talk about some of the vision behind the church and even the strategy of how you're getting started.
Yeah, I think just a reality and an integrity are the things that we're really, really aiming for. I mean, we fall under a global vision of Mosaic, which is to live a life of faith, be known by love, and be a voice of hope in our city. And under that, we have core values that we live by as a community. But here in London, we have what we call a manifesto. And that manifesto kind of just outworks what it is that we'll do here to live up to those core values and to be known by the mission that we exist to achieve as a church. And that manifesto is summed up best in a sentence in that like every single person has a purpose, and in that purpose is an unimaginable potential, and we're trying to make sure that Mosaic is the best place to be able to fulfill that potential, help others do the same. And so I think it's really exposing people to the fact that there is that purpose and there is that potential, and it's usually found and discovered in helping other people discover that very same thing that you've just been exposed to when you have this relationship with your creator, Jesus.
Well, you're starting with gatherings. I imagine you have groups, one on one time. Like,
Mm,
talk about how you're gaining momentum, how you're getting the word out about this
yeah.
new kingdom that you can live out as part of Mosaic.
Yeah, I think that was the really interesting and maybe different thing when we actually planted is everything kind of started with a conversation. Honestly, I spent some time in LA with our Mosaic family out there, and at the end of 3 months, we had a conversation about okay, like how are we going to do this? And we started out in a coffee shop. And like I say, the point of difference was that it wasn't like, hey, join this team or join this movement, or we need this comms person or Instagram person. It simply started out with a community. And so I gathered 15 friends, former colleagues, people that I just known, people that I was desperate to actually come to know Jesus, and put him in a coffee shop in a random place in West London because I had a friend of a friend who worked in the coffee shop and they let us hire it. It was really cool. And we just sat and talked about what that manifesto looked like. And off the back of that, we got kicked out after a couple of hours of conversation. And this beautiful thing happened. I'll never forget it. Not a single person went home. In true English style, we ended up in the pub next door having a drink and talking about the potential and the future of what this could look like. And honestly, the all the conversation kind of ventured into that potential and purpose. And it's a couple of words that we use quite a lot in here in Mosaic London is but it's because we're a new community and we're really getting to discover what that means and looks like step by step. And then we've kind of come to a place now where there is some structure within the community, but the structure isn't there. We don't live from a structure. We kind of have a structure that helps the community go forward in the direction that we're trying to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a little bit different from what I've kind of heard and seen, but it's been beautiful, and it's definitely brought about its own challenges.
Well, talk about that. What are some of the challenges in planting in London like that?
I think community is so unbelievably important, and the way that it's kind of grown and developed is that a friend has brought along a friend. When enough people do that, it's kind of like, for example, this past weekend, we started doing monthly gatherings, and we had more new people than we had people on team. And so that kind of creates this environment where it needs to be more than a system that we've got in place, or more than a structure that we've got in place to be able to actually look after these people that are coming through the doors, because we don't want to be something that becomes stale, where it's just a recycling of people who come and go, but we actually want to build a community that's going to have an impact on the city. And so the responsibility goes further than simply having people on team doing specific roles, but it's like creating an actual culture of what we would call discipleship, whereas it is my we have this incredible moment where we discover a relationship with Jesus Christ. But on the other side of that, we quickly discover that there's a responsibility to go and do the same with the people that are in our world.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the absolute challenge, is being able to not just teach people, but teach people how to teach.
Hmm.
And that takes time. And that's why it's so important for us to not only have this Sunday gathering where something is presented, but we actually have meetups around the city where we can sit and discuss and discover what this potential and purpose actually means and looks like in my real life, when I go to my job, when I hang around my family, when I'm sitting in a meetup and there's someone who's been there for a shorter time than me. It's like, oh, wait, now it's my responsibility to sit next to them and show them the experience that I had walking into the space. So yeah, that's the beauty of it, but it's also the challenge of it.
Well, there's a lot of pastors, I'm sure, who would love that problem. I've got too many guests,
Yeah,
more guests than people inviting, but I love that part of my experience at Mosaic was just the way I feel like Mosaic tries to capitalize on the fact that someone is new to faith and the excitement that comes from that from the very beginning, learning to share your faith, learning to serve, accessibility to lead. I mean, Erwin used to always say maturity is not how much you know, but how quickly you're willing to obey. And there are
yeah,
people that were leading small groups well before they ever would have had a chance at another church, but it requires that conversation of
yeah.
gentle guidance, rebuke when that new person leading may take things a little sideways. I love that you're
And they
experiencing
definitely
this,
will,
and they
by the
will.
way.
That's exactly right.
Which is, I think that's the fun of it. I think that's, I'd even go as far as to say that's the point of it.
Mhm.
Whenever I read or study and look at things biblically, some people might call it the start of the church, but I regarded it as the foundation of the church when we look at the church in Acts. And that foundation is the place that we actually build from, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you go to Acts 2, you have that moment where the church is actually born, and, they dedicated themselves to the apostles' teaching, and there was fellowship. And so we have this rhythm already where it's like, okay, I now understand. Now I'm going to go and sell my possessions to make sure that my friend is good. And then in Acts 4, it talks about the fact that there was no unmet need among them. And so it's like, oh, well, wow, you've got a job. You've got a skill, but you don't have a job. I've got a space in my project at the minute to like fulfill that need for you. Let's do this together. But then later on in Acts 11, we see Peter having this revelation, and he has dinner with people that maybe he shouldn't, and he eats things that maybe he shouldn't. And so all of a sudden, we have this person who has opened us up to this world of church community through Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And he's sitting in a conversation with the very people who have discovered what he's discovered, and he has to explain himself all over again. And so there's all of a sudden, it's almost like going back to the beginning, because in Acts 11, 19 to 21, they rediscovered the fact that it's like, oh, wait, we have to go again. And so they began to share the gospel with people who are outside of their circles. And so I say all that to say that we're always going to have a space for new people, and hopefully they take it left. Otherwise, it's maybe just, like I said, a recycling of the old. And so rather than be frustrated by that, let's have fun with it. Let's talk about what this new person wants to talk about. Let's be sidetracked for a second because this person doesn't understand the old language or church language that we're using to describe something that we've sat on for years and years. And for them, they're just walking into and are slapped in the face by this new life that they could live. Let's roll with them for a second.
Well, and that's one of the things, Mosaic's always been good at, is taking ancient truths and communicating them in a way that modern people would understand. I love this idea of just people moving like the early church. And I always remember Erwin would say, we want to be like the early church, but when we read the letters of Paul, we forget that the early church was filled with immorality, heresy, and conflict. That's why he wrote these letters. Maybe talk a little bit about, between your monthly gatherings, what does relationship building, discipleship look like in your context?
Yeah, I'm really discouraged, but encouraged at the same time by what this means and looks like, because I think sometimes it's really, really easy to be lost in the fact that you're not the answer. We are the answer as a community. And so what's really encouraging is that I don't have to do this by myself. In fact, I'm not meant to. But what's also discouraging is like, okay, sometimes it feels like that's exactly what I'm doing, that I'm doing this by myself. But every time that we kind of gather together, the thing that I'm honestly most proud of in our community is that I'll sit with a new person and ask them about, hey, their experience or what's available to them in our community and the opportunities that we have to discover what this walk with Christ looks like. And their response is usually, oh yeah, this person already had coffee with me and they told me that. Or, oh, I was at dinner with so-and-so and they said the same thing. That's so funny. And so I think in between our monthly gatherings, that's the most important thing, is that our monthly gatherings point to the fact that that's not the only place that we gather. And right now, with it being, February, we're looking at relationships. And I think sometimes as planting pastors, we can be a little bit discouraged because maybe there is a conversation that's had where someone who's been a believer for a long time might bring across a comment to say, like, I don't know if it's like there's enough depth in this conversation. But I think that's a really good thing, because no individual should only be getting their depth from your 20 to 30-minute conversation or talk that you've prepared on a Sunday. The depth of our relationship with Christ comes from the depth of our relationship with people. And so if everything that they're getting and understanding from that relationship is what you say on any given Sunday, then I think there's an issue that we need to address. And that issue is actually discipleship. And so I think a more fruitful conversation would be, this was so refreshing because I had lunch and I actually got to delve into what this person thinks because of what they said in this meetup that we had, where there was 20 people talking, but we got to actually have a one-to-one. And it wasn't me, the pastor, that was having that one-to-one. That it was probably, in our case, sometimes it's probably the person that got there the week before them. And hopefully, as we grow and move forward, that dynamic will expand itself a little bit. But I think that's the beauty of what it is that we're trying to navigate, is that a lot of what we would call post-Christian is actually what the disciples had to face up to when they were in the early church. because it was post Christ. It was post those 3 years of ministry where Jesus was here and actually speaking into those hard and fast rules and regulations that the Torah and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, so to speak, had ingrained in people. Jesus came to challenge that, and he really did. And so we have a lot more in common with the disciples than maybe we want to admit, because they're a little bit less intelligent than sometimes we give them credit for. And maybe we're in the same boat.
Yeah, thank goodness we have the Holy Spirit to guide us. Otherwise, we'd get
Exactly
sunk.
that.
That's right. Well, I'm always so encouraged hearing the stories of church planners and McLaren. I'm really grateful you'd spend some time telling us about Mosaic London. Again, it's on Instagram at Mosaic LDN. Would you just for a moment encourage pastors who, I mean, you've been doing this for a while before you planted too, but when you get discouraged, what are words of encouragement or passages of scripture? If there's a pastor or church leader that's discouraged, how would you best encourage them right now?
Yeah. Honestly, the two words that I repeatedly have to tell myself daily is keep going. And sometimes that's a really frustrating sentence to speak out, and sometimes it's really encouraging, but it's one that's really important, because if we're turning to scripture, he's never going to begin in you something that he's not going to finish. And so all we have to do is put ourselves in a position to show up so that he can. Um, my encouragement is that you cannot be passive, because we are created and called to a life that is beyond what we can imagine. And so, man, let him do what he needs to do in you so he can do what he needs to do through you. And that wouldn't just be an encouragement for church planners. I think that's an encouragement for all of us.
I love it.
Of
Well, I
course.
really appreciate it. Keep up the great work. God bless you and all that you're doing.
Thanks, Eric. Good to spend some time with you.
Thanks for joining us for the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. Go to my website, ericbryant.org, for my newsletter and free resources.